Before we begin off the record, I need to share something important. When federal funding was cut, WKAR lost $1.6 million. Thanks to cost-saving measures and community support, we've closed much of that gap, but we still face a $500,000 shortfall, and we can't finish the job without you. Your financial support keeps programs like Off the Record freely available to everyone in Mid-Michigan. How can you help? Become a sustaining donor today. Already a sustainer? Please consider increasing your monthly contribution. Visit wkar.org/OTR to donate, or click the link in the description. Now, Off the Record.
Welcome back to OTR. Republican Kevin Rinke ran for governor once before. Is he about to do it again? To find out, sit in with us as we get the inside out. Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubic.
Welcome back to Studio C. I was thinking if East Lansing was a ski resort town, everybody would be happy, right? But unfortunately, it's not, and we're not happy. But anyway, welcome back to Off the Record. Nice to have you on board. The president talks about nationalizing the election and maybe bringing federal people into Detroit. What's the story here?
It's that. We had President Trump earlier this week talking about floating the concept of nationalizing elections. I know that there's been some concern in Michigan over the fact that Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson is running for governor. She'll also be overseeing the elections. So there's been some clamor among some state-level Republicans in Michigan that could be a way to go. But Democrats, including Governor Gretchen Whitmer, have firmly put their foot down, saying that, Michigan's election systems is safe and secure. There's no reason to be doing this, and that any attempt to federalize elections should be met with extreme concern and alarm.
And in case you missed it, her final word was, "not on my watch," which is pretty strong for this governor.
Yeah, so I think you saw a lot of Democratic candidates and elected officials come out very strongly against this. What was interesting to me was in a press conference shortly after those remarks were made, but long enough that you would have heard about them. Speaker Hall was asked about this and what his opinion was, and he said, "Oh, I'll have to look into that. I haven't heard those comments." So either he really hadn't, or he was just trying to dodge a question on it.
Was that the fog machine at work? We'll never know.
Well, I don't know how much of this is like real legit policy and how much of this is just trying to find something politically that rallies Republicans. I mean, the Secretary of State Benson's probably going to be the nominee for governor, and they're trying to find something to soften her up with way before the general election. And this is something where I think Republicans feel like they have some type of traction with their base. In this case, the 2020 election in the city of Detroit, the Republicans still feel like something strange went on there. They're not quite sure what, and there's never been anything firm that's ever validated their concerns, but they still feel like something fishy went on, and Benson was at the heart of it. And so if Trump goes ahead and rolls out some red meat and gets them all to devour it, all the good for them.
The Democrats are concerned, I don't know what the level is on a scale of 1 to 10, but it's certainly not 1, that somehow they're going to try to undo what the people say.
I mean, look, I think that anytime the President of the United States makes a statement, regardless of, because I've heard this a couple times regarding Trump, that like, oh, he's just joking. It's just the way that he speaks. He's not a politician by birth, so of course he's going to say things like that. I firmly believe that if you are a position such as the President of the United States, what you say should be met with a serious level of concern. You are not an average citizen. You aren't Joe Schmo on the street just talking to your friend. You're somebody with real backing and real power. And even if people do kind of want to look at this and say, well, this is just another thing of Trump maybe running his mouth, maybe talking about wanting to do something but not firmly going after it. I mean, we look back to 2020. We look back to the multiple court cases that went on where he attempted again and again and again to disprove the results of the election to no avail. So, I mean, I don't actually think that Democrats are underreacting by saying that we can't let this happen. I do think, though, that there might be room for conversation about Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson overseeing an election that she, could be or will be the Democratic nominee in. But I think that we need to pull back from this concept of federalizing elections, because that's just simply not the way to go.
Can she go ahead?
I also think, Democrats definitely, even prior to these comments, have voiced their concerns about federal meddling in elections. I think Governor Whitmer was in an interview with NPR during the auto show in which she said, yeah, we're having tabletop exercises.
Right.
And Secretary Benson has said as well that she's participated in some of those that they are planning for this eventuality.
There was some sort of a secret group that was working behind the scenes.
Yeah.
She didn't really identify who, but you got to assume the state police were involved, the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, and who knows who else.
Yeah, as far as taking Benson out of the election system, look, the Bureau of Elections oversees all these local clerks who actually tally the votes. The Secretary of State doesn't tally any votes.
She's an overseer.
She's an overseer. She takes all the information that's run through the computer and they do all the math.
But she owns the computer.
Yeah, right. But you can do it longhand. People still know how to do math. They can still write it on a piece of paper if they need to, or they use their own calculator. It's not that hard. There was there was an error with the MSU Board of Trustees race was it last election cycle with Rebecca Bahar Cook, and the locals had to get together and they're like, oh yeah, look, there was a mistake made somewhere. These things happen, but she's not counting ballots. And what we're talking about with the federal oversight, the issue on the table is just making sure that the people on the rolls are legal citizens, which is its own political pot.
And I do just want to underscore that for a second, because I definitely don't want to make it sound like I'm implying that Secretary Benson, has her fingers in the pie there. But when I'm talking about having these conversations, it's exactly that. It's an educational conversation. Here's how our election systems work, because we do have a quite unique way.
It's decentralized.
It's very decentralized, meaning it's very hard to hack the election, to make any. So I think that if we do want to have a conversation about what this means, a big part of it needs to be education.
Well, as we would have it this week, we had 3 former governors in our town and another governor on Zoom at a conference on the issue of civility. Let's see what they were saying. The Michigan Civility Coalition brought together former governors Granholm via Zoom and in person Governors Snyder, Blanchard, and Engler. The 3 governors were asked to describe the level of political civility out there these days.
Well, it's poor, Tim, in terms of civility.
It's pretty bad. I think we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, this is an abnormal time.
Governor Granholm says candidates have a responsibility to, well, she hopes for this.
That it doesn't get personal and it doesn't get over-the-top ridiculous, because it just contributes to cynicism and the disintegration of democracy.
Of course, Governor Snyder calls for more relentless positive action, and he wants the word fighting removed from political ads.
Negative ads worked for some time period, but I hope people just tune those out. If you hear a negative ad, why do you want to listen to this stuff?
Governor Engler thinks civility would return if lawmakers did more compromising instead of this.
A win is decided this way. I win everything and you must be humiliated and destroyed. Because that just doesn't lead to any ability to make compromise.
The 2 governors disagree, however, on the democracy. Is it at risk or not?
I do, yes, of course.
I don't. I don't think we're at risk. I think we're at a very tough time right now.
But what you just saw there is what they believe is what's missing from politics today, the ability to disagree without being disagreeable.
I think that's the way it has to be.
Wow. It was good to see all of them again.
Yeah.
But I digress. What do you make of that?
Well, what kept coming to my mind as I was watching that is that isn't Governor Snyder advising Matt Hall and his Republican caucus?
Well, he thinks he is.
And I can't think of someone who really pays much attention to civility than Matt Hall. During his press conferences, there's no insult he doesn't say about Democrats, and especially in the Senate. So I just think it's interesting that they're calling for it, but the groups that they're advising don't appear to be adopting that.
And I think that gets to the root of it is I think it's all well and good and fine to continuously call for civility, but we have to get to the how. How are we going to actually make tangible change to get to that civility? Because it's very easy to say, and I don't disagree with Governor Snyder there when he says, yeah, why would you want to listen to something negative? Just tune it out. That's all well and good, but I mean, we have data at this point now that's showing that these are the kind of ads that get people's eyes on them. And people's attention spans when it comes to elections, they're very short. So you got to get their attention somehow. Unfortunately, I think we've come down this path where we still need to figure out that why. And it's nice and great that we have folks from both sides of the aisle being able to come together and talk about that. But then at the very end, when you talk about how they couldn't even agree on his democracy at stake, then where are we at?
First of all, I thought it was a heck of an event. I mean, just to pull that off logistically, to get everyone together. And I know Granholm couldn't be there in person, but she was there over Zoom. I just thought that was a great event that we were able to pull that together. The second thing I thought of is that it's easier to pontificate about civility when you're no longer involved in the process. And that's not to take away their perceptions, because I thought all their perceptions were very, very good. But it's like when you're not in the thick of it anymore, it's very hard to do that. And then the other thing I thought of is that it's hard not to talk about the lack of civility without talking about Donald Trump. And then the second you inject him into it,
boom.
Yeah, then it's kind of like you're putting the match into the dry tinder, and it's like,
noticeably absent from the conversation at all. You didn't hear either Republican talking on stage mention him by name. It was like, we want to talk about the elephant in the room without ever mentioning the elephant in the room.
But these four governors, I think, demonstrated over their years that they had their political disagreements, and it may have gotten ugly, but at the end of the day, they did sit down in a room and they did try to get something done in an agreeable manner. Now, it may not have been pretty, okay, but I think their attitude that they brought to the game, quote, end quote, my word, not theirs, was the long-held thing that the only thing that works in this process is compromise. Where you get something, I get something, you don't get everything you want. And that was Governor Engler's point, that we've lost our ability to compromise. It's a zero-sum game. Either I win everything and you get nothing, or we don't have anything.
Yeah, that's a good point. And some of that, though, also filters down to the public level, though, too. And I think that was addressed with social media and people's silos and where they choose to get their information from. There's not... not everybody watches this program, unfortunately. Not everybody watches. Yeah, I slipped that in there for you, Tim. That was a compliment for you. But everybody gets their stuff from material that they
want to go to get their beliefs reinforced.
That's right.
Scary.
And in today's society, they can do that, whereas during Governor Engler's time, you could not.
All right, we had a special election, Kyle. Basically, what were the tea leaves that you were reading as the results? What did we learn, if anything?
Well, I think we learned quite a bit. We learned that there was about 9,000 more Democratic voters who participated in that election than Republicans. That's huge for this particular district. We're talking Saginaw Bay, Midland counties.
Trump country.
Well, it's swing country. That's the most important thing. Saginaw has been the bellwether county for this state for the last several elections, and to see so many more Democrats participate in that election than Republicans has to be concerning for Republicans.
But I mean, it's Trump country in the terms that when NAFTA came in, a lot of Democrats went south.
Yeah, that's true.
So the composition of that area has changed, because it used to be solid Democratic. Now it's a jump ball. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, people are reading the tea leaves for the Michigan House, for the state Senate. I mean, this was a special election for one seat in the Senate, but it also, was an opportunity to really look at the possibilities for control of the House, for control of the Senate in the 2026 election.
Yeah, I think it's a temperature check of sorts. This is maybe the first real look that we've had at what voters want to see. We talk about this being a swing area of the state. I would maybe caution, though, that this is a special election during an odd time. It's one-off. So, you see the Democratic appetite there, but I don't think the Democrats should rest on their laurels with that, nor do I think they will. But, it's a temperature check.
It would be easier to ignore if you didn't see the tea leaves in the other elections across the country. Yes. The Republicans in these special elections have flipped 0 seats. I mean, they've retained some, but they've flipped 0, and the Democrats have flipped several. And this was a Democratic seat before this election,
So
too.
What was the Republican Party line? Not to worry?
Yes. It was when we tell our voters how important this seat is and that we could split the Senate, they'll come out and vote. Don't worry.
All right, let's call in Kevin Rinke. Mr. Rinke, welcome back to Off the Record. It is indeed good to see you. You drove up this morning from Macomb County. How was it?
I did. You know, the drive was great. The drivers weren't.
Yeah, welcome to Michigan. All right, let's play a little game. Let's assume that you're on this side of the panel. What's the first question you would ask Kevin Rinke?
The question that so many people have asked me, are you running for governor?
And the answer is?
No.
Why not?
Several reasons, actually, Tim.
Did Perry Johnson scare you out?
Oh, God, no. No. You know what? But here's my view of the current ticket for Republicans. We have 4 people that I think are the primary contenders that are political beasts. You've got John James at the federal level, Cox at the state level. You've got Eric Nesbitt and Tom Leonard. All been intricately involved in politics in Lansing. Now you've got Perry Johnson, who immediately becomes a contender because of the money that he has. Perry doesn't have to raise a dime, and he can outspend every single Republican tenfold. If he chooses to, how does that fall? Because, like you said earlier, people in elections, their issues are short. Who did I see last? Did I like what I saw or not? They aren't, unfortunately, educated in many instances on anything other than their particular issue. So Perry's viable. We didn't need Kevin Rinke to overlay. I would challenge each of you when I ran and tell me, is John James running on the same ticket that I ran on for issues? Is Eric Nesbitt running on the same ticket that I ran on for issues? Tom Leonard? The whole group. What are we running on? Education. And we would all agree that education is failing in Michigan. We don't agree on the solution, but education, regulation, jobs, the economy, silly. And how are we going to take Michigan, which is tumbling, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with our politics or not, Michigan's overall ranking continues to fall.
But in your mind, you knew you could beat all of those people.
Yeah.
So here you sit with a big fat NO.
Well, yep. I'm an issues guy, and I'm a business guy. I don't believe that I was successful enough in convincing people to say, look, we need a business person. And my personal belief is that the only thing that's going to save Michigan is a business person.
All right, let's see what everybody else says.
Who do you think should win the primary, and who do you think will win the primary for the Republicans?
Who should have won the primary would be me, I would laugh to say.
Well, in this current
and who
primary.
would win the general. But in this particular case, I believe that it comes down to John James and Perry Johnson. Perry because of his money, and Perry fills a different lane than any of the other 4 candidates. John James is going to have name recognition. That's a natural conclusion. What people don't ask in the polls is, do you like John James? And that's the question that Republicans and independents are going to have to decide. Did they like John James? And I think that there's some clouds on the horizon coming out of Macomb County to see how people will actually vote.
Well, so you bring up John James, you bring up Perry Johnson, and you know, James, you've talked about a few issues there, but Johnson, you keep mentioning the money. I mean, is that really all it takes nowadays? Is if you're just the candidate who has the most amount of money, you're pretty much a shoo-in?
No, that's not what I'm trying to imply. There's a lot of intangible qualities, and in no way am I saying that any one of those is the best candidate. What I'm saying is that because our attention spans are short, the person who can get out and get on social media, the person who can afford to buy statewide TV, and that has a strategy that works. That's the key. Will Perry's strategy work? He may spend 10, 12, 15, 20 million dollars, and if it doesn't resonate, he's out.
Mr. Rinke, what I'm hearing between the lines here is that you went out and your name was floated. You floated yourself as a possible candidate, but you didn't get maybe the response that you were hoping to get from business community and people who would have financed your campaign or contributed to you. What did you hear in that process that was discouraging to you, that I guess maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing this time around?
Well, I'd point out to you in the last election cycle, while I was a self-funder, I raised just under $1 million for the primary, which actually made me one of the top contenders from fundraising without asking. People believed in my message. The question is the Republican Party ready to win or not? And in my business evaluation, I'm not going to invest my time or my treasure if the people aren't willing to win. And Republicans right now like to complain, but they don't like to come together. And you hear people saying, well, if my guy doesn't win, I'm not going to vote. And if the only reason Republicans turn out is Donald Trump being on the ticket, the Republican Party in Michigan is in big trouble. They have to have candidates that resonate with them. They have to have candidates that they believe in, and they have to be willing to compromise. And you guys were talking about that earlier, even on their own candidates.
You're slightly out of step with your party.
The truth hurts sometimes.
Was that a yes?
I don't think that I'm out of step with reality, and I think my party deals in reality.
The question was, read my lips, it was the party you're out of step with.
Well, I think that the party in Michigan, when it's compared to national parties, struggles right now. And it has not been cohesive, it has not coalesced, and it is a work in progress.
Are they just too committed to Trump? Is that the issue?
I wish I knew the answer as to why the dysfunction. There seems to be within the Republican Party the haves and the have-nots. There's a paranoia that everybody has to agree. You know, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? And the Republican Party right now, individually, the members that make that up, think that you have to be right versus coming together. And I think we have an unhappy Republican Party versus a happy one.
When you said earlier Republicans aren't ready to win,
yeah.
Do you think they're going to struggle in the general election?
Well, I think that they have challenges, okay? And the challenges amongst our electorate, and it's from the top of the party right through the delegates to the voters. Republicans will lose in Michigan every time unless they can attract independent voters. There's simply more Democrats than Republicans. So let's start out with, if in fact Republicans, and there's a percentage that say, Donald Trump's not on the ballot, so I'm not going to vote. How does that help the party be successful? There'll be pockets, and those pockets perform because they have great candidates. And I don't think in the last few election cycles that you guys would say Republicans put up great candidates. They put up great people, but you would argue with the quality of the candidates. And I think that Republicans argue with the quality of the candidates.
Well, when you talk about the candidates, you know, this is another election where we're seeing quite a few Republicans throw their name into the running. I mean, is that a detriment at all? You know, when we talk about the, you know, if my guy doesn't win, I mean, is it on the party more to be vetting these candidates? Like, are there too many people throwing their names into the race? So then when you end up past the primary, people are like, well, I was a Johnson guy, he didn't get in, so I'm not going to come back.
I applaud the people that choose to run, okay? I'll use myself as an example. I came out of nowhere. I looked at our candidates and I said, great people. They're patriotic. They're good Michigan citizens. Do they have a skill set? And do they have the ability to either self-fund, because money is a component on both sides, and do they have the ability to raise money. And I got involved, as I said to you guys previously, because I thought I could make a difference. Now I finished second, okay? We did some, interestingly enough, a small sample poll on election day when I lost the primary, and I actually beat Gretchen in that sample poll on the issues that I thought were important. And within that statement, I'm going to bring out that my issues might have been too central because they moved everybody forward. They might not have been severe enough for the primary voters in that far-right Republican group that likes to put forth candidates that can't win when it comes to the statewide positions.
So in other words, you're going to vote for Mike Duggan?
You know what? Who I vote for is my business. And
I loved how your head went back and forth on that. Did you catch that?
I was reshifting my seat.
Precisely.
My family's known the Duggan family for many, many years. Mike's father was a very good judge. He was a very solid Republican. I've known Mike as an acquaintance for many, many years and respect the job that he's done. Anybody who underestimates Mike Duggan is making a mistake.
But you're not going to endorse him.
I'm not going to endorse anybody.
Who does his candidacy impact more, Democrats or Republicans?
Help me understand the question better.
There's going to be people who are going to come out and vote for Duggan. If he was not in the running, they would have maybe voted Democrat or Republican. In your mind, who is he helping? Is him staying in the race hurting Republicans, or is that hurting Democrats?
Well, here's how I would respond, because I considered...
And we're going to do overtime.
Okay, I considered running for governor very seriously. And so we studied Mike Duggan. And here's my take on it. Mike Duggan currently is trending for more than 25% of the statewide vote. And if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, you better take notice.
That's a good place to just put it on hold, because I think we may follow up on that. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Let's first look at these closed credits. Come back to WKAR.org for OT with Mr. Kevin Rinke. See you there.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan public television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.